Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Concierge Corner. My name is Don Tiegs, and I am your insurance concierge. Today, I want to help you make one of the most important and most avoided conversations feel natural again, and that is the long term care conversation. Because here's what your clients already know deep down, even if they don't say it out loud. They've planned for retirement income and they've planned for taxes and also market swings, but they have not planned for what happens if their health changes that plan. So, let's begin with the real issue. Long-term care isn't just a cost. It's a disruption. It can disrupt a spouse, it can disrupt adult children, it can disrupt their legacy, and it can quietly undo years of good planning if nobody brings it up early. Now, most clients avoid this topic for the same reasons many agents avoid it. It forces people to picture a version of life, that they don't want to imagine. A life of needing help or losing independence and becoming a burden. And because it feels uncomfortable, that conversation gets postponed. And then health might change and underwriting gets harder and your options shrink. And what could have been a calm planning decision becomes a rushed crisis decision. So, how do you open that door without sounding too dramatic? Well, you keep it human, you keep it simple, and you ask questions that feel just like normal planning questions, right? Questions like, have you ever thought about what you would do if you ever needed some form of care, whether it's in the home or elsewhere? And where would you like that care if you needed it and you had a choice? And if you had to write the checks for care, what assets would you liquidate first? And if we could reposition a portion of those assets into a strategy that creates leverage for care and still preserves value for you or your family if care is never needed, would you be open to taking a look at that? So then pause after each one of those questions and just let them answer, because their answer will help you formulate a plan for their long-term care needs. Now, let me bring this down to a real life with a story, because I think stories are what make this topic really stick. And here's a story about me and my family. So back in the day, both my mom and dad had traditional long-term care policies, right? They've planned for the future. And my mother, it was traditional long-term care, right? So it was the use it or lose it style, which in some cases it's not that bad, but in this case, my mother happened to pass away before she needed it. And so I called up the insurance company, and there was basically say, sorry for your loss, Mr. Tiegs, but there was no other benefit other than the long-term care. Well, because my mother was caring for my father at the time because he was suffering for early onset dementia. Now, his in-home caregiver was gone, right? So he went into a nursing home. And again, he had, luckily they planned for the long-term care. The problem is that the policy that they had only covered 4.5 years, right? My father lived 11 years in their nursing home. So all of that work that they worked so hard for, the legacy they wanted to leave for the kids, for me and my brother, right? Literally all of that was out the window, because all of a sudden now we had to start paying for his care. So we liquidated his assets, right? Had to sell his properties, liquidate the annuities that he had, and even remove the cash value out of his life insurance policy, right? And the month that we wrote the last $100 out of his checking account was the month he died. So he never did qualify for Medicaid. So we literally spent everything down, and he did go broke in the nursing home, right? So this is why I believe The long-term care conversation is one of the most caring things we can do for clients because everyone has a story. And I'm sure you're probably thinking of one right now. So use stories to get your clients emotionally engaged in telling their story, which helps you break down those barriers in having these long-term care planning conversations, right? Because, we already know the odds aren't in our favor, right? I mean, about 7 out of 10 people over the age 65 will need some form of long-term care in their lifetime. And long-term care isn't just nursing home care. It can be in-home help, it can be in assisted living, it can be in memory care, and the costs can be shocking when families see them up close. So the question becomes, how do we help clients create a plan that keeps the options open? Well, I think this is where a hybrid long-term care solution can be incredibly helpful for the right client. Because many people hesitate to buy traditional long-term care coverage for the one big emotional reason. What if I pay premiums and never use it? You know, just like what happened to my mother, right? Now, hybrid designs can reduce that fear by building in value either way. If care is needed, there's a pool of benefits designed to help. If care is not needed, then there is a benefit that goes to the family. And for certain clients, especially for those who think they can just pay out of pocket, there's another simple way to frame that. I mean, self-funding sounds great, especially if they have enough assets, but it can force clients to liquidate those assets, maybe at the wrong time, and maybe deal with tax inefficiencies and make major decisions during a crisis. Now, what I like to say is, absolutely, you definitely can self-fund, but why would you want to? I mean, you've created your wealth using leverage, whether that's time, money, or resources. And by using insurance dollars, that can create leverage and turn an unpredictable, potentially huge expense into something planned and predictable without breaking the bank. You can also help by reminding them that the rising, healthcare related costs in retirement are one of the biggest threats to stability, lifestyle, and legacy. So, here's your takeaway for this week. Think about the clients who may have mentioned long-term care in the past, whether it was for themselves or a loved one. And remember these questions that we asked earlier. Like, have you ever thought about what you would do if you ever needed some form of long-term care, whether in the home or elsewhere? Where would you want that care to happen if you had a choice? And if you had to personally write those checks for care, what assets would you liquidate first? So if we could reposition a portion of those assets into a strategy that creates leverage for care and still preserves value for you or your family if care is never needed, would you be open to taking a look at that? Now, if you're thinking, I know I should do this, but these conversations don't feel natural for me, or, I just don't have enough knowledge to talk about this, with your clients. Well, that's exactly what I'm here for. The concierge resource is here for you. Bring me into those conversations, and I can help you structure the conversation and position hybrid solutions in plain language and keep the planning tone front and center. And if you want help growing and diversifying your practice, reach out to me at 763-265-3297. So clarity, confidence, and concierge. So this week, let's make sure your clients have a long-term care plan before life forces one on them. Again, If you have any questions or simply want to help positioning long-term care to your clients, give me a call at 763-265-3297. Thanks so much for watching and have an amazing day.